Well, many thanks for staying with us on the newsroom. I am Folashade Ogurinde. The appellate court in Abuja has upheld the conviction of Faisal, the son of Abdurrashid Maina, for conspiracy and money laundering. Maina, the former chairman of the defunct Pension Reform Task Force team, is at Kuje prison in Abuja for pension fraud to the tune of 2 billion naira and his free governorship ticket of the People's Democratic Party (PDP) in Ogun State. The presiding judge, Justice Ekwo, fixed the date after taking arguments from counsels representing Jimmy Lawal and Oladipupo Adebutu, both governorship aspirants of the PDP, who laid claim and counterclaim to the ticket. Lawal, who contested the May 25th governorship primary of the PDP, had challenged the emergence of Adebutu, alleging that unlawful and invalid delegates list was fraudulently used by the party to conduct the election. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, has cautioned against the condemnation of the Student Loan Bank being proposed through the Student Loan Bill on the basis that previous attempts had failed. A statement issued on Wednesday night by the Special Advisor to the Speaker on Media and Publicity, Larry Lasisi, said critical stakeholders in the education sector expressed support for the return of the Student Loan Scheme for students of tertiary education in Nigeria. According to him, negativity against the bill runs counter to preferring solutions to the challenges of funding confronting Nigerian students in public tertiary institutions who will have their dreams and aspirations truncated due to lack of access to tertiary education. The rise in vaccine-preventable diseases such as measles and polio in African countries has been attributed to the slow uptake of childhood vaccines at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. A report by the Tony Blair Institute shows that the COVID-19 put some health systems under immense pressure and stretched others beyond their capacity. According to the World Health Organization, almost 17,500 cases of measles were recorded in Africa between January and March this year, marking a 400% increase compared with the same period in 2021, and in that the cases were from 20 African countries. Nigeria's excess crude account has declined by 89% in the last 8 years, moving from $4.1 billion in November 2014 to $472,513 in November 2022. The balance in the excess crude account accounted to $472,513 on Wednesday, as the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee shared a total of 736.782 billion naira in October revenue to the federal, state and local governments. The federal government, however, explained that the depletion was as a result of an advance payment for the purchase of patrol vehicles for the Nigerian Navy. 3 teenagers and an adult have been shot on Wednesday night in the parking lot of a strip mall in Temple Hills, Maryland. According to the police, the shooting happened around 6:25 p.m. when a suspect shot at a group. In a tweet, the Prince George's County Police Department said the victims suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The police, however, did not have information on any suspect or motive. Pep Guardiola has announced his agreement to a 2-year contract extension that will keep him at the Premier League champions until 2025. In a statement on Wednesday, Guardiola said he is pleased to stay at Man City for another 2 years, and in that he cannot be in a better place. Guardiola's current deal at the Etihad Stadium is due to expire at the end of the season. He has already extended his contract twice during this time at the club. And that's it from the newsroom. Many thanks for watching. I am Folashade Ogurinde.
My name is Marcelina Osegali Akbojoto. I'm from Edo State. I'm an artist. In the studio like cutting stencil, calligraphy work, and from there up to my secondary school level. So it was something that was just a part of what I was doing. I was also making greeting cards at that time. I started collecting fabric as far back as 2013. So I go to the tailors around and I tell them what I want to use the fabric for. Because one, it's fabric, and then it's a very popular fabric. I personally love the designs, the pattern, and the colors. They are very beautiful, and it's just calls out to me. So, and they are fabric that we use in celebrating different occasions. You see them as ashwebi for birthday parties, for burial ceremony, for graduation. So I think it's kind of versatile, and it's a fabric that people can relate with. With the pastel, and I wanted to push myself. And some of this fabric were just lying there. Some of my mom fabrics were just lying there with nothing to do. So I started making fabric jewelries with them. After some time, I was still bored. So I was like, the idea just came that since I've been using pastel to create portraits, why not try use the fabric for the portrait itself? So the idea was there, and then there was an opportunity to put in for a competition of the bin, and it was required for us to go out to the streets, pick all kinds of ways we can lay our hands on and create it. So I got some fabric from the house, went to some tailors, I collected the fabric, and that was like the first opportunity for me to use the fabric. I also used some electronic wastes. Then I combined them and I made the artwork, and fortunately it won one of the prizes. So since 2013 I've continued exploring the fabric. This fabric must have passed through a lot of process, from the person who designed it to the factory where it was manufactured to the market. Then someone goes to the market to get this fabric and takes it to the tailor. The tailor takes the parts that he or she wants, then make a fabric out of it. Then I go to that tailor to get the remnant. So it has passed through a lot of people, like it has gone like a full circle. So I go there to collect it. Fabric already has like some form of history, some stories behind them. So that's why I think I'm drawn to the fabric. Because the fabric are wastes, it means there are a lot of things we can use around us in the environment that we necessarily do not even have to spend a lot of money on. Because when I started, I didn't have money to buy the sophisticated art materials like the oil color, or even buy some sculpting tools. I couldn't afford it. Start with what I have and then look around me, and those fabrics were there for me to use. So that's like one of the messages I'm trying to pass. Then I also explore the themes of womanhood. trying to talk about women empowerment and how education helps that goal. So in my work, you're seeing theme of education, theme of womanhood. I also talk about my family's journey to the great-grandmother's dream, because while she was alive, one of her dreams was to be able to go to school, and she didn't have the opportunity. So I explored that part of my history to talk about the stories of the women before me and after me. Since I started using the fabric in 2013, it's won one of the prizes that same year, and I've gone on to have solo exhibition in Lagos and also showing some group exhibition even here in Lagos. I've also shown the works in South Africa and in the US, being well received. My work starts off with the idea I'm trying to communicate, the story I'm trying to tell. Go on to the canvas, which would have already been stretched and primed. So I transfer my sketch to the canvas. Afterwards, I start laying the fabrics on the canvas. Then with time, the whole canvas is filled up. Then I start adjusting the light and shade, trying to adjust the texture and get the right form. Then the last thing I do is varnish after I must have applied fabric and color together. I've been able to create works close to 100 in different sizes. The smallest of my work is 2 by 2 feet, and the largest to date is 13 feet by 8. Art tells the story of the people and the environment, so it's only right for one to also explore materials from within that environment. Because when you look at the history of art, forefathers, the people who made the Boku, the knockout, the Biniya, the Ife, they made use of the materials in the environment. They made use of materials like clay, they made use of materials like brass, and even wood to create sculptures. So it's because art tells that story, it's right for us to also explore materials within that environment. Some of the challenges are getting some of these materials that are not readily available in Nigeria. So it means it's more expensive, because then you have to ship them to Nigeria. So they are quite expensive. And sometimes convincing some tailors to part with the waste fabric. Some of them have this funny expression on their face because they don't really believe what you said you use the fabric for. So they need a lot of convincing. And sometimes we even allow them enter the studio to see what we use this fabric for. I'm inspired by the stories I hear, the stories of my being, and moreover, I love to create. And when I'm creating, I find joy in doing it. And I also discovered that people also are able to connect and feel some level of joy. So I want to be able to share that my gifts with the world.
There are many sad and dark events in human history. One devastated the African continent like slavery. To understand some of the plight those who were sold into slavery went through, one must visit Goree Island, their last point of departure from the African continent to the New World. Boarding the ferry to Goree Island. This is no slave ship, but it is no less built to capacity. But this time, with goods, tourists, traders, and for a hint of some animals, even though there are not two of each kind. Slavery ended more than 153 years ago. One can't help but feel sadness just walking the streets. Imagine what went through the minds of these citizens of various countries as they were hauled, sold, and shipped to a strange new world. Where did these slaves come from?
At that time, each African ethnic group had its price. And the most expensive ethnic group used to be the Yoruba. Yeah, they were from Nigeria. Because those Yoruba were very strong and tall, and they worked very hard in the plantations. That's why they were more expensive. They took those kids for two reasons. First, because in the plantations in America, there were some special jobs, typically for the kids, and they did them very well. And then because of most of those kids were from the parents very strong, because they thought that when they will grow up, they will be strong like their parents. That's why they took them. in all the 28 slave houses in Gorée Island, the slave masters have the right to sleep with the young girls. Once a young girl was pregnant, she became free here in Gorée Island or in Saint Louis in northern Senegal. But she wasn't totally free because usually she worked as domestic slave in the European houses, you know. That's why some of the young girls found a kind of interest to be pregnant from white masters so they can be. At that time, the price of a man was up to his weight and his muscles. So the minimum weight for men was 60 kilos. Those who have less than 60 kilos, they put them in this special cell just in order to fatten them up. Let me tell you that they did not buy slaves with money. It was exchange. You know? For example, to buy a man up to 60 kilos or a virgin girl, you could give a gun or a barrel of wine or a blanket or something like that. To buy a child, you could give a mirror or a necklace or a piece of tobacco or something like that. So that's why people used to say that Africans also were involved into the slave trade because some of the African tribal chiefs were collaborating with the Europeans.
Yeah.
And here, this is the punishment room for the rebels. Those who did their masters, they put them inside to punish them. As you can see, they could not stand up inside because of the hook. 4 or 5 people at the same time in this small room. In 1991, we welcomed in this house Nelson Mandela. And then Mandela came inside. He stayed in for about 5 minutes. But when he came out, Mandela was crying. Right and left you have the waiting rooms. The slave used to wait here before the shipment. At the famous door of no return. Because once the slave got out from this door, it's mean bye-bye Africa. They took them to America and they never come back. Because of the rocks, the boat could not come near. That's why from this door, they built a kind of palm wooden bridge. But during every shipment, some of them tried to escape by jumping into water. But they never could go far because either they were killed by the security guards or they were eaten by the sharks. Why the sharks? Because at the time, in all the 28 slave houses in Gorée Island, once a slave got sick, just to avoid the epidemics, they threw him into water and that attracted the sharks that's around the island. Let me tell you that slavery lasted in Gorée Island from 1536 to 1848, more than 300 years. And during that time, there were about 15 to 20 million slaves coming from all over the African western coast through Gorée Island to America. And 6 millions of them died because of bad treatment. 6 millions.
very emotional. But he knows it's very, very, very in a high level the history and the relationships between Africa and other countries, and also he knows exactly what's happened between the 16th until 19th. I'm talking about the slavery and the Atlantic.
Walking away from the island, there are some pretty paintings on the street walls. One must ask, what have these walls seen, or what cries have they heard over the last 300 years? Somehow, I don't want the real answers to that question. Maybe you do.
Hello and welcome to the program. I am Abisola Adebayo. This year's COP27 Climate Summit in Egypt is fine end, with nearly 200 countries racing to strike a deal to steer the world towards cutting planet-warming emissions and scale-up finance for countries being ravaged by climate impacts. Some negotiators and observers warn that failure to agree on such loss and damage funding could sour the United Nations talks and thwart other deals. The issue has leapt to the top of political priorities at the summit after more than 130 developing countries fully demanded it was added to the agenda for the first time, following more than a week of talks that left much unresolved and featured speeches from dozens of world leaders but scant announcements of new fundings and pledges to cut emissions faster. Negotiators now face a mammoth list of items on which to clinch deals by the end of the week. Announcements so far include a few $100 million of funding for poorer nations pledged by Germany, United States of America, and others, far off from the hundreds of billions that vulnerable countries need to cope with escalating droughts, floods, and rising seas every year. Government ministers have since taken over the negotiations in the summit to also hunt for a deal that attempts to avoid any weakening of ambition to address climate change. So, has this COP27 summit really achieved its target, and did it eventually live up to expectations? To discuss all of this further is Olumide Idowu. He is the co-founder of International Climate Change Development Initiative. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, Mr. Olumide. So, you know, it's just a day until the end of COP27. What would you say has been achieved so far? What are some of the highlights and discussions that have been held so far, especially regarding the African continent?
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this privilege to speak. So you know that as you are fighting for the climate conversation, and as you are fighting for the response for African countries, I can tell us now that the loss and damage conversation lately, we've been able to get the technical support from the developed country. But that was related to the Santiago agreement. But we are still looking at what is going on. And as I'm talking to you, another session is starting again on the loss and damage conversation. And we are always, according to the African Group of Negotiators, we've not really gotten what we are looking for, because as long as Africa is the part of continent that is suffering and pass through the brunt of climate change, then this conference is supposed to be an implementation conference, but we are not seeing that as of now. 2 days ago, gender constituency also have the same thing. Nothing is coming forth. We don't want to continue to have promises. We don't want to continue to have pledges that is not, translate to implementation. Australia, United States have pledged another money. How come are we getting pledges when the one that pledged a couple of years ago, the $100 billion, have not really even been, given to developing the global south? So how do we continue to talk about this issue and turn the conference to like Christmas, activities yearly? So for me, I think the African group of negotiators, they are really doing their best, and it is high time for us as African countries to start looking at the kind of languages we are using in negotiating, so that we not look as if we are begging for money, we are just asking for money every time. But we need a concrete action, put us in a place whereby everything we talk about will really come to implementation. But for this conference, I think we are still a step backward as well again. But for the issue of loss and damage, which I'm also following up, I can tell you that as of yesterday night, we've been able to reach a support for technical support. But when you say technical support, you need to define it. So those are the kind of things we are still looking forward to know whether we are still on the right track when it comes to loss and damage, whether we are still on the right track when we are talking about adaptation. So it's for us, it's very, very disappointing that we are still going back and forth with promises and pledges rather than implementation that we are looking for.
Okay, yeah, so you said the African group of negotiators they are yet to get what they want. What exactly would that be?
And as I'm saying, it's concerning them making pledges. Fine, you are telling them that you are making this, but how do you make sure that these pledges turns to implementation? Because they've made such pledges in 2019 in Spain. They make such pledges through the global Glasgow Pact. What is happening now is you did not talk about the implementation of what you've said before. Now you are making another pledge. I remember during the speech of the United States President, he make emphasis on the flood and the disaster that is happening to some countries. But the pledges are really not concrete in the sense that how will it translate to implementation? That is what we are talking about.
I mean, apparently, and with what you've actually said, finance has been on the front burner of this particular summit. African nations have made demands for monetary commitment from these developed nations. Do you actually think that money would solve the issues of climate change in Africa?
Yeah, anybody that you ask that was, but how are we asking for this money? Are we asking for this money in loan? Or we are asking for this money by making sure that Africa have suffered from their influence? So they need to give us this money, not by loan. Most of all this money have been given to us by loan. You don't even have money to solve our problem presently. You are giving us a loan. When do we pay back? So what they need to do for us is to give money for adaptation. And motivation cannot be loan. We are talking about mitigation as well. Technology is there. How many African countries can actually invest in technology to drive the economy? So financial mechanisms need to be spelled out, and people need to understand that how to access this finance also matters a lot. So every money being given to Africa must not come in loan. There must be a negotiation on how this money is going to be spent, what this money is going to be used for. We not continue to find ourselves owning developed countries every time and down. Thank you.
You know, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni and even other African leaders that are in the summit, they've accused the Western countries of, reprehensible double standards when it comes to commitment to stop climate change. Would you agree with this, that other developed nations are not so invested in restoring the earth?
Well, that's a conversation because every leader of every country is making sure that they speak to their needs. For the case of Nigeria, we're talking much about the energy transition to our ETP, the national determined contribution. We're also looking at loss and damage. But for every country that is talking about anything, that means that is the urgent action that is needed to be solved. But why I always bring in the African group is because they are the ones that negotiate on behalf of Africa in some particular instance. The issue of climate finance, the issue of loss and damage. So each country have their own demand, and those demands are also bilateral conversation with investors, with institutions. So those world leaders that have said their own is based on the need of their country and how they see climate change today.
You know, with the summit finally coming to an end, would you say there's been workable agreements in place that would maybe shape climate actions before the next summit next year?
Well, we are always hopeful, but I'm just optimistic that we will still get back home and nothing. To be very frank with you, we've not gotten to anywhere. And the only thing I've worked in this conference is that a lot of countries have had a lot of bilateral agreement with institutions that is also promising. But those promises are promises that is tackling some specific issues. But when it comes to the negotiation table, we've not really gotten the developed country to make commitment. Then it's a genuine commitment that will solve the climate crisis. To our world leaders or African leaders to start looking inward. How can we retool the ideas and the opportunities that we have now as natural resources to change the narrative of what we are looking at? So for me, in the scale of 1 to 10, I think we are 4 over 10 because we've not really gotten what we are looking for because of the technical support they say they are giving to the Santiago framework. Maybe that is the only thing I can say the major outcome for us as a continent coming from Africa or the global south. But for now, the actual outcome we are looking at is not yet reflected in implementation of action back home in Africa.
So I was asking you to talk about the other contentious issues in the talks in the summit that's still really unresolved, despite a Friday deadline.
Yeah, okay. So climate finance is a big issue. It looks like nobody is attending to that presently, because when somebody said our country, our continent, Africa is owning there, it shows us that we are still in that frame of climate finance denial now. There's nobody that's making commitment, and genuine commitment on climate finance. And the issue of mitigation, it has turned to they are leveraging on our incapacity when it comes to technology to make us to understand that are we ready for mitigation. And when there's no how you want to talk about adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage without financing for communities. So those kind of issues are the issue that is coming in between all this conversation we are having. So I think, like I said, African developing countries, the global south, we need to retune the conversation to make them to understand that we are not begging. It is our right to get financing for adaptation, financing for loss and damage.
And briefly now, I want you to talk about expectations for the G20 summit. Other people see it as another opportunity to call on these rich nations to honor their promises to tackle climate change. So what are your expectations of the discussion, and do you expect to see some major deals, especially on climate finance, to be made?
Yeah, thank you very much. G20 has turned to something like a Christmas that we do every time. But my own expectation is just very simple. African leaders, how do we start thinking inwardly to make sure that we are always ready before we add the conversation with these developed countries? Because we are still the ones giving them advantage of what they are doing, and we need to tackle that issue now. Another thing again we need to look at critically is that are we ready to access financing as a country? If we are not ready, then we are just, or then it is not going to work. Like they said, anything for us without us, it is not meant for us. So every conversation they are going to be having that is not including the local community that is suffering from the brunt of climate change, then it is not meant for us. So what leaders during G20 should look at what they are causing, and African leaders should look at how to galvanize support from the or to actually talk about the issue that is climate facing, not only in asking for the money, but letting them know the story that is happening on ground. Because when you don't show those things to them, for them to understand numbers of people that are displaced, numbers of people that are not that are into poverty, energy poverty, then nothing will actually happen. They will always think that we are asking for money. So what leaders, African leaders, we should not go and ask for money, rather ask for or look for this that will be able to speak to these people for them to release that fund that is meant for Africa to work on adaptation and lesson learning.
Well said, Mr. Olumide Idowu, environmental expert. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today, and thank you for your insights. Well, we'll go on a short break now, and when we come back, we'll be talking about economy. Stay with us. Welcome back. Let's now turn our attention to the economy. For the 9th straight month, Nigeria's inflation rate has seen a steady rise. In the month of October, the Consumer Price Index, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, accelerated to 21.09%, marking a 0.32 point increase from 20.77%. This is coming as food inflation in October 2022 also increased to 23.72% from 18.39% in the corresponding month last year. According to the NBS, the possible factors responsible for the increase include disruption in the supply of food products, increase in the cost of importation due to the persistent currency depreciation, and the general increase in the cost of production. Now, for more insight into this development, I'm joined on the program Kechuku. He is the MD CEO of Dignity Finance and Investment Limited. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. Let me start by asking, what exactly do you make of the latest inflation rate of 21.09%? What would you say are the possible factors driving this increase? And are we actually going to continue like this even as we move towards the festive season? I mean December now.
It was expected that the increase at the end of October. So this is expected, and the factors are already known and already there. But of course, some of the factors were already existing before the end of the month of October. The distortion in the supply chain, which was caused by the war in Russia and Ukraine. Just note that Russia produces the highest quantity of grain and wheat in the world, and of course followed by Ukraine. So these are two largest producers of these grains, and that has affected the prices of bread and other things that depend on flour for production. And of course, so, like I said, some of the causes were already there before now. We already talked about the insecurity that has existed in the north, especially. In fact, right now, spread all over Nigeria. So many farmers no longer enter their farms. So because of that, there is a distortion in the supply chain, and that has actually increased the food inflation. We already know what the diesel price, energy cost is today. You just know that many people that are producing one thing or the other are no longer are struggling to have a high cost of production. So these are the extents we have seen. Of course, just recently we saw where the exchange rate shot to as high as almost 900 naira per dollar, even though it came down a little, but of course it's still as high as we can imagine. So these are the major things that are increasing the inflation rate. And you just mentioned the seasonal period. Usually within this period, from October, November, December, we'll experience the seasonal inflation that is caused by demand pool. And so these are things that will happen, and so which presupposes that the month of November will also experience another increase. due to the season that we're entering into. So these are the things that actually have caused the increases and the rise in.
Right, so how do you think the Central Bank of Nigeria will react to the rise in inflation, especially as regards to the interest rate?
Of course, we expect that if they continue to meet, we expect right now, even with the decision to have a redesign of the Naira, I expect that certain ratios are going to change, that the CRR is going to increase in order for just to enable them mop up money in circulation, M1, M2 in circulation. So we expect that this will happen. Whether they are going to react immediately by increasing the MPR is not certain. I mean, it can go neither here nor here, either here nor here. So we expect that they may wait for certain increases because they just increased the MPR just the other day. So we don't expect them to increase the MPR just because of this marginal increase. Otherwise, I expect that the CRR will increase because they want to really use that to mop up more money in circulation.
Okay, so explicitly now, like you said earlier, it appears rising inflation is not just a Nigerian thing, as even global economies such as the United Kingdom are experiencing the same. How would you react to this?
Obviously, not just the UK, all the countries of the world, because the supply distortions that we're talking about has affected all the countries of the world. Of course, we're talking about the supply of gas, the supply of petroleum products. European countries are heavily hit right now. Prices of petroleum products have gone so high that people are beginning to even demonstrate in some areas. So these are the kind of, the same thing on inflation is causing it globally. And so, but where we need to watch are those ones that are within our control, the ones that are peculiar with our own environment. We need to work on those ones if they are within our control. But the one that is global, there is little or nothing we can do. Of course, what we can possibly do in such areas could just be to localize our own production, have some, make sure that our raw materials are sourced, grow agro products in grains and in wheat and other grain products. We'll grow them locally and reduce our dependence on importation. But these are things that will happen in the long run. Right now, I think it's going to affect productivity. Of course, recently we heard about the flood that filled up many parts of the country. That is also going to affect the prices and some other grains that have been affected. So these are the things we expect. So for us to reduce the inflation rate, all we do is just to make sure that we don't depend so much on some of these imported goods and grow ours and do things within ourselves in order for the global inflation impact not to hit us adversely.
So, increasing inflation is not the only challenge facing Nigeria's economy. We also have issues like fall of the Naira and, many. Exactly do you think, or what do you think the government can do, to cushion the impact on the common Nigerians now?
Yeah, the economy of the country is controlled by monetary policy, by trade policy, by fiscal policy. And these are all things controlled by different areas of government. We know that CBN controls the fiscal policy. CBN has to ensure that the pains and the exchange rate, the impact of the exchange rate does not continue to affect Nigerians. But to what extent they have achieved results in this area is that which we need to question. On the fiscal area, we just know that, of course, certain aspects of, we know that our revenue base is not just anywhere. The revenue to debt service ratio is the highest in the world. And so these are all the things. So what we need to do is just identify those things that have affected our economy. Once we identify them, we will now isolate them and start making efforts to reduce their impact one after the other. If I talked about revenue base, we then have to talk about what is actually affecting our revenue. Well, you see the oil revenues that we're not collecting, So we need to work on our revenue. If we're talking about our debt, is there any way we can reduce the borrowing we are doing? Is there any way we can reduce our budget expenditure in order for us to reduce our borrowing? So these are the things we have to look at. So the areas of government that we have should actually work on this. So when we're talking about trade policy, we also have to look at making sure that we'll continue to grow our export level and reduce our importations. And so what are those policies we're going to do to continue to grow our export in order for us to have a balanced trade, a very favorable balance of trade? So if we do all these things, over time, we may have to have a good result arising from the efforts made by these three arms of our economy.
Well, finally, before I let you go, it's impossible to talk about food inflation without touching on flooding. And will this year's flooding be on food prices in the coming months?
A lot. The impact is going to be heavy. The impact is going to be heavy, especially on grains. And it came at a wrong time when an item like rice will be needed in every household for the celebration of the season. So we're going to talk about two things. There's going to be a major drop in supply, going to be a heavy increase in demand. And so when we have two of these things clashing, then the impact is going to be heavy on us. So we expect that the food inflation is going to rise more than this by November ending, and in fact in December. So these are the expectations we have arising from the flood and what it has caused to the agricultural subsector.
Right, Dr. Chijioke Ikechukwu, the MD CEO of Dignity Finance and Investment Limited. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Thank you for your insights. Well, that's how much we can take on the program today. I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
I don't know how to swim, but when they load me in the boat, we were like 155 people in one boat. So when we are going to Italy, we have run many hours. So on the way going, our boat now capsized because of the waves, and our boat is pumping boat. So when the waves throw in, and they load us about 3 boats, 2 at the front, we are at the back. When the waves come in a big way and throw a capsized boat, 65 people died in the same boat with me. About 30 girls and 35 boys died in the same boat. So when they are dying, they are sinking down. Some was catching my leg, some drawing my clothes on my bag, shouting, "Biggie, Biggie, Biggie, Biggie." That's how I remove the clothes. I stay hanging, holding the rope that I'm holding on top of the boat. That's how. So after everything, all of us, about 55 people, the people that remain on top of boats, maybe they are not more than 80 people again. Everybody was crying that we are dying, no rescue. From 4 o'clock in the morning, our boat capsized. We are on top of the water till the next 4 o'clock in the evening. On the afternoon time, a helicopter come on top of us to come down like this a little bit. All of us was crying, raising hands. Already newborn baby, one woman having over there to raise it up, to raise the baby up in a way the helicopter will see the baby. So we are shouting for rescue, rescue. So all of us was crying. I said, God, is it today I will die on top of sea? All of us crying. So as we are crying, the helicopter, they wind up, but I believe that they will be seeing us through the screen. After everything, when the helicopter left, it's like they contact the police people in the people now coming with a small boat to come and rescue us. When they rescue us, they will carry us to the prison to go and lock us. And when they lock us there, the Nigerians but in that very highland, we come and bail us with like 500 dinar. 500 dinar, when they bail us like 500 dinar, like they were using in form of 50,000 Nigeria. They use it to bail us out, then we go and lock us somewhere. Our family, calling our family in Nigeria to pay 150,000 in their account. Then we get like 100,000. They use me to do business. In my life, even if they told me that Libya is like America again, I cannot try that country anymore in my life because I suffered a lot, honestly.
Many thanks for joining us on the newsroom. I am Folashade Ogurinde. The leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, sued the Director General of the National Intelligence Agency, imprisoning him in Kenya for 8 days before his extradition to Nigeria. The special counsel to the IPOB leader, Aloy Ejimako, disclosed this on Wednesday morning via his Twitter handle, where he posted pictures containing the suit filed. Ejimako said the suit was prompted by new evidence gathered implicating the DG beyond what he described as infamous extraordinary rendition. Some members of the All Progressive Auspices of aggrieved Northern APC Christians have endorsed Labour Party presidential candidates Peter Obi and his running mate Yusuf Dati Ahmed for the 2023 presidential ticket. The group, in a statement signed by one of its leaders, former secretary to the government of the Federation, Babachi Lawal, said it came to the decision of supporting Obi Dati presidential ticket after a painstaking review and analysis of the alternative tickets. Describing the ticket as satanic, the group said it believes that the Obi Dati ticket will give Nigeria a breath of fresh air and the greatest opportunity to redeem the country. The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Mahmoud Yakubu, has reassured Nigerians that polling unit level results will be uploaded in real time and the integrity of the process will be upheld. The chairman will make this noon on Wednesday as he received a delegation of the Commonwealth at INEC headquarters in Abuja. Said the commission will continue to deploy technologies to ensure free and fair elections. He further informed the delegation of the massive improvement recorded by the commission since the 2019 elections, and in that INEC is intent on an election that meets international standards. China has reported record high coronavirus infections on Thursday, with cities nationwide imposing localized lockdowns as testing and other curbs that are fueling frustration and darkening the outlook for the world's second largest economy. The resurgence of infections nearly 3 years after the pandemic emerged in the central city of Wuhan cast doubt on investor hopes for China to ease its rigid zero COVID-19 policy soon. In business, the airline operators of Nigeria has expressed displeasure about the numerous issues in the aviation industry. Adindro Airport Authority of Nigeria, FAN, is responsible for the flight delays and cancellations. According to the chairman of Air Peace, Alan Oyema, no airline in the world would want to delay flights because of the cost implications. He further explained that Nigerian airlines are operating in a very hostile environment with limited infrastructure. On the foreign scene, fresh Russian strikes battered Ukraine's already failing electricity grid, causing blackout across the country. And in neighboring Moldova, in attacks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told the UN were an obvious crime against humanity. Addressing an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council, Zelensky said Ukraine would put forward a resolution condemning any forms of energy terror. He also invited the UN to send experts to examine and evaluate Ukraine's critical infrastructure. Former Manchester United Ronaldo has been banned for 2 domestic matches for knocking the phone out of an Everton fan's hand. The 37-year-old appeared to hit the phone as it went down to the tunnel after defeat at Goodison Park in April. Ronaldo will left United by mutual consent on Tuesday after criticizing manager Erik ten Hag. was also fined £50,000 by the Football Association. And that's it from the newsroom. Many thanks for watching.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Ecosphere. I am Mary Anu. Now, 2022 has been a year of big weather events. A climate catastrophe in Pakistan that killed thousands and displaced millions. Europe and parts of China experienced extreme temperatures this summer, and the U.S. continues to see a consistent lack of rainfall. Meanwhile, millions in the Horn of Africa are starving due to an epic drought, and in Nigeria, the recent flooding that destroyed homes, hectares of land, and killed over 600 people was also a reminder that climate change is real. This is the reason why the meeting of world leaders, environmentalists and activists in Egypt at a conference of parties, otherwise known as COP, is a big deal as it provides a platform for African nations to discuss a climate finance package to advance the African Union's climate strategy. The 27th edition of the conference is ongoing, and discussions on mitigation and adaptation methods as well as other issues have been raised and are being discussed. Well, to bring us up to speed with some of the discussions, Aribabul Suleiman, an environmental activist, joins me on the program live from Egypt. It's good to have you join me. Now, it's 2 days until the end of COP27. Now, what has been achieved so far? What are some of the highlights and discussions that have been held so far, especially regarding Africa?
This is the high-level week of these negotiations. Ministers of various countries will be coming in, while their group of negotiators will be handing over to the ministers in case there are issues that they are unable to agree on. But in terms of whether this COP is living up to its being as an African COP in terms of the expectation of Africa, I cannot say that in a positive. I cannot respond in a positive for now, but then we still have more than 2 more days of negotiations to go. So some of the expectations for Africa in terms of adaptation financing, in terms of loss and damage funding mechanisms, in terms of mitigation commitments, are not coming through. Expectations in terms of special needs and consideration for Africa are not flying the way we had thought. However, the negotiation still continues, and some good decisions. But don't forget, this is called the implementation COP. So meaning that a lot of the commitments on Paris Agreement, a lot of the commitments from Glasgow, this is where we should be talking about how do we implement, what needs to be put in place, what funding mechanism, what commitments or pledges are being made, and how are these being actualized, what kind of partnership do we build for implementation, because the next COP 28 in the UAE will be the global stock taking, and you cannot do global stock taking unless there have been some clear, intense efforts around implementations. So for now, the negotiations are still on, and we keep raising our voices with the hope that it will break conscience where it ought to be, and have some positive response in terms of the outcomes of the negotiations.
Well, financing has been on the front burner. You know, African nations have made demands for monetary commitments from developed nations. Now, will money solve the issues of climate change in Africa?
Money is required to solve the issue of climate change. Perhaps the question will be, do I see the money coming? So there's a lot of money we need to come to Africa, even though Africa's share of climate financing, climate investment is still very poor. For instance, in terms of renewable, Africa's share of total global investment in renewable is just about 3%. So Africa needs money. Money will do a lot, especially for building resiliency to our big transportation system that emphasizes and what I do say, especially in terms of those monies that are supposed to come from climate debts to be paid by developed countries who have brought us all to where we are at. Because if you remember, since Copenhagen and then Mexico, 2010, there has been this fund raising $100 billion up to 2020 annually. This has not happened, not much of that has been given. And Africa is actually saying that for adaptation, the continent will require that the bar be raised to about $150 billion annually to 2025. None of this money seems to be coming. However, there are other monies in terms of private sector money. Is it the kind of money that the continent needs to build resilient infrastructure, to build resilient energy access, to industrialize? What manner of money would be beneficial that do not push the continent into another depth of debts, which we currently are in? So those monies that ought to come based on different common but differentiated responsibility and capabilities principle of the convention would seem to become. Yes, a lot of money you hear, but these monies are far in between. For instance, it's estimated that there is a gap of about $125 billion annual gap between what Africa needs for energy infrastructure and what it is.
The G20 summit is also being held, knowing that this would be another opportunity to call on rich nations to honor their promises to tackle climate change. What are your expectations of the discussion, and do you expect to see some major deals, especially on climate finance, to be made this year?
Well, so it's obvious that no global negotiations, no multilateral process can ignore the issue of climate finance, can ignore the issue of coming up with money to help, especially in view of some of the extreme climate events that we're seeing all over the world. And of course, especially in view of, again, of the crisis, the energy crisis that is rocking Europe and part of the Americas due to the conflict going on. So this has brought new realities. So the G20 summit perhaps will be another opportunity for negotiation. But I think it's really calling out the integrity of the negotiations, the sincerity of the multilateral process. Just looking more like endless negotiations. The commitments, the pledges, the disbursements are not commensurate with the kind of conversation, the kind of data that people have in terms of what needs to be done and their willingness to do the right thing. Pretty low on ambition and actualization.
Well, all right now, Suleiman Aribabu, environmentalist, thank you for joining me on the program. We'll take a break now, but when we return, the program will continue. Just stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Well, floods are not uncommon in Nigeria during the rainy season from May to November, but they have been extreme this year. Officials and residents blame climate change, but also poor planning and the release of excessive water from dams, a process that is meant to ease pressure. Our farmers were warned ahead of time, but this wasn't enough as the country was already witnessing rampant insecurity, with gunmen repeatedly attacking rural communities, farmers to abandon their fields. Now, food inflation year on year was also at 23.3%, in part because of ripple effects on the import-dependent country from the coronavirus pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, with all of these, how has food production been affected in Nigeria, and what is also to be expected? To speak on this, Julius Organ, agro-enthusiast, joins me now on the program. Now, please speak to us about the level of damage the floods have wreaked on crop yields in Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on your show once again. I'll go straight to the point. I would say that we've lost a lot as a nation. We've lost farmlands, we've lost property, we've lost about 600 of our citizens to death by the floods. And I'll go on to give you some examples. In NEMA, that is the National Emergency Management Agency, reports that more than 1,500 farming communities in 22 local government areas in Jigawa State were impacted by the flood. In Bayelsa, the whole state was almost inundated and submerged. In Nasarawa, 45,000 hectares, is the biggest commercial rice farm in Nigeria, was impacted. And Olam's reports that it has lost about $15 million of investment to the flood. So we are still, as I speak to you, counting the cost of damage in terms of property, in terms of farms, and in terms of humans that we lost in the deluge.
Aside, we went from insecurity worries and how farmers were being killed in their farmlands to worrying about the effects of climate change on food production and now the flooding. Now, would you term this a national crisis in the agricultural sector?
It is beyond a national crisis, my sister. It is a national calamity. It's a national emergency, because it's going to have a long-term effect. Farms that were inundated are completely lost. Farmers have lost their yield for the year. Now, let's even look at the fact that we do not have a very active national reserves. We are supposed to have reserves in the national grain, in the silos, in the national silos and the national, but we don't have enough to cushion what is going to be the after effect of what we have experienced from the floods. The after effect is going to be, there's going to be very poor, if any, harvest. And thereafter, there's going to be rising costs and inflation in food prices. So if we do not have enough reserves in the national reserves to supplement what we have in the market, then there's going to, that is in a very mild way of trying to paint a picture of what we are about to face. So I think it's a national emergency.
I know the flood caused loss of lives and properties, but would you say it has been all bad for agriculture in Nigeria?
Say that again, please. I didn't get your question.
if you can, the flood caused, well, probable loss of lives and properties, but has it been all bad for the agricultural sector in Nigeria?
Definitely. No other sector is worse impacted. And if you consider the fact that the majority of our active population are actually subsistence farmers, then you understand the picture of what is ahead of us. It is farmers are very well in because we've lost livestock. We are also losing farm produce. They practically lost their investment because if for Olams, for instance, $15 million of rice estate, 45,000 hectares of rice. It's beyond what some African countries could invest in as their total, production for the year. So we're actually in for times. I must say to you, there is no way of overstating the impact of what has happened, because there is. Our farming is basically seasonal. We depend on rain-fed agriculture. So the rains came and we intended to, make the best of it. And the rains came in form of a disaster. So you can imagine what it is.
I mean, we know that water, in essence, are you trying to say that that huge amount of flood, the water, did not do anything positive for the crops in the country?
I would say both yes and no. Flooding is entirely not a bad incident. It's not supposed to be entirely a disaster, but over time, because of the way we live, because of the way communities and cities are spread, this is why we suffer the shocks even more. Flooding causes damage in the sense that it washes away farmlands, like we saw in Anambra, and we also lost human lives. It causes landslides in many instances, and then it inundates property and washes off crops. It also causes other effects, like the aftermath could be like we'll have waterborne cholera because water sources have been polluted. So, but then, if you look at history, you will see that the Nile River Basin in Egypt, for instance, uses the floodwaters as an agricultural production stimulator. So when you have the river basins, which are natural receptacles for too much water, they get silted up with manure. So the soil basically improves. You can find out that if you go to some riverine areas, there are people who move close to river basins and cultivate they do dry season farming, especially relating to vegetables on river basins. Why? Because the flood has deposited silted alluvial soil and brought nutrients from other places to the river basin area. That's the benefit of having floods. But in a situation whereby we have degraded, the water channels are clogged to the refuse or have been built up, then the water is beginning to find areas where it is going to settle. That is when we have damaging floods. And in places like Anambra, you know what happens in Anambra? The governor has described it as the landslide capital of Africa. So it's that bad when entire communities lose their land and property because of water, that's how bad it can go. There are the positive effects are not nearly as much as the negative impacts we're feeling because of the way we have chosen to live.
Well, away from the flood matter, the climate change conference is currently ongoing, and African leaders and environmentalists have made demands for financial aids to solve the effects of climate change. Do you agree that if injected into the issue of climate change, and then maybe we can see an improvement in the agricultural sector?
I would say that money is not enough. We can burn up the entire world trying to look for money or trying to make money. In fact, the pursuit of money is in the guise of industrialization is the major principal cause and driving force behind global warming. Let's all is going into industrial production and releasing dangerous chemicals in order to make money. But like someone has warned, by the time we finish making money and cutting down all the trees, we'll discover that we can't eat money. We can't live on money. We need the world in order to spend money. So the pursuit of money is one of the principal reasons behind climate change and global warming. But then we could use money to drive other developmental initiatives like the Sustainable Development Goals. We could use money to pursue the cause of renewable energy. So we stop, like in Africa, we stop the culture of cutting down trees in order as fuel wood. So let's face the fact, we could damage the world in the cause of money is not the immediate solution to this problem. The solution lies in the world coming together and telling ourselves the wrong facts that we could make money, but we won't be able to eat money. And the world is wearing away, and time is passing us by. And climate change is global. Everybody is impacted by it. Rich and poor alike. Thank you very much.
Well, Julius Aga, agro-enthusiast, thank you very much for joining me on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's how much we can take on this edition of the program. Many thanks for watching. I am Mary Kanu. Bye for now.
COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a new coronavirus introduced to humans for the first time. It is spread from person to person, mainly through the droplets produced when an infected person speaks, coughs, or sneezes. These droplets can land in the mouths of people who are nearby. These droplets are too heavy to travel far in the air. They only travel approximately 1 meter and quickly settle on surfaces. This is the reason person-to-person spread is happening mainly between close contacts. The exact time that the virus can survive on surfaces is not yet known. So it is wise to clean surfaces regularly, particularly in the vicinity of people infected with COVID-19. Hands touch many surfaces, which get with the virus. You should therefore avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth, since contaminated hands can transfer the virus from the surface to yourself. When coughing or sneezing, cover your mouth and nose with the bend of your elbow or use a disposable tissue. If a tissue is used, discard it immediately into a closed bin. The most effective way to prevent the spread of the new coronavirus is to clean your hands frequently with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap, and this will eliminate the virus if it is on your hands. Stay healthy and prevent the spread of COVID-19.
You look at Lagos and you'll think you're in one big dustbin, residents say, as they narrate ordeals with pollution. According to the World Bank, at least 30,000 people die yearly in Lagos due to pollution, and the tales told by some residents bear witness to this. This is home to over 300 families who reside in Itire on the Mushin local government area, a community built around the canal that has been transformed into a home recognized by the Lagos state government. Gaining entrance and a mixture of different putrid smell welcomes you. Children running around exposed to the biohazard and physical hazard of living in this area.
So many years now we don't face this mess. If you can look around, you can take a cameraman to observe the area. Even you, where they talk to me, you perceive some odors. We get some small children here. She be see us here. We dey chop here, we dey feed here. We are human beings. We not Nigerians. Some days ago, one big rain will fall for this area. Small pikin for that park with water carry pikin go. If you ask anybody for this area, they will tell you the story. And they come from mosque, so as I hear the story. But today now, okay, imagine the dirty around and all that. Rain never fall. If rain fall now, all this dirty now, you go enter person's house, you go enter anywhere. Cholera everywhere.
I think being on road going okay at maybe 15 years. Okay. Tajo wa nínú àdúgbò yìí. So ti ye. Àdúgbò gba ton de ṣe títí Adébáyọ̀ bí bá ton ṣe gbogbo ẹ̀ fún wa. Abi pé báyà wọ́n máa ṣe gbogbo gutter yìí náà ni. Wọ́n de bá wa ṣe but nsin bí ọmọ ṣe gbogbo bí ọmọ tí òjò wá gbé lọ lọ́jọ́ yẹn ló mú anybody gan ta because ìgbà ton bọ̀ wá láti Jímọ̀ lọ́jọ́ yẹn. Jímọ̀ ni wọ́n lọ. Wọ́n bọ̀ wá. Àwọn ọmọ yẹn wá mọ ibi tí orí pákó yẹn wà mọ́ àwọn méjì náà fara wọn lọ́wọ́ ìkíní bó ṣe bọ́ sínú odò nìyẹn ìkejì olówó ń fẹ́ lọ fà ó fẹ́ lọ fà yọ bómi ṣe gbé yẹn lọ́n tiẹ̀ nìyẹn tó ti àwa rọ ìjọba kan bá wa ṣe àdúgbò wa kó dáa.
I was born here. This is my year of 25 years now in this area. You understand? And this area now have been dirty for so years. When I was in small self, I was seeing all this kind of thing. Talk less of now that I've already been gotten hold, and still yet the area is still like this. You understand? And I want government to come and do here so that it will be okay, so that water everywhere. This dirty now is not from only here. The dirty now from under side and other side too. They used to come here to come and jump hard. You understand? And when it jump hard, it affect us that lives around because the water does not flow. Assuming it's flowing now, we will not be complaining. Let them come and help us and do it so that this dirty now will not be just jumpered and be staying, so that we will not be feeling sick.
Party packs, pep bottles, feces and other carrying components are the aesthetics around the surrounding. Having lived for many years, some of the residents I spoke to say they strongly believe the state government does not care about their lives or living conditions.
We dey pray for Nigerian government to help us for the environment, to help us. Make government self come look this place. Make them know wetin to do for us so that we self go live better life as a good Nigeria wey we be.
Àwa kan bá wa ṣe àdúgbò wa kó dáa. Kan lè bá wa ṣe environment wa kó dáa because bómi ṣe ń gbé ọmọ lọ kó dáa. Wọ́n bá wa ṣe bridge bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn. So ti yé. Kan bá wa ṣe bridge bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn kó cross. Kó mi ó lè bá máa lọ because táwọn èèyàn bá ti ń lọ free. This
place cannot take them, just even though how many, just a 6 months they will do it because of the corruption. Make some people, local government council, they will take off the money and put it in their pocket, eat it, and why we are suffering it.
Journey to preach about healthy living and further prevent the spread of infectious diseases, public health expert in Siabasi Ekonem joined me to this community where he says living in such an environment has long-term implications.
People are living here. There's a high level of pollution in these places such that even the air, the effluent from this place is really stinky. And that tells to this air pollution affects people that are living here because you can see young children of under 5 years that are staying in this very dirty environment. That increases the advent of childhood diseases like cholera, diarrhea, amoebic dysentery, scabies, ringworm, dandruff, all those kind of skin diseases as a result of, the contact with water from this very, very unhealthy environment. Because there is defecation, open defecation here, when the water comes up, it carries those feces and deposits them in open water sources like wells, and people fetch water from that well. This leads to waterborne diseases like cholera, like amoebic dysentery, hepatitis A and E, just all kinds of waterborne diseases.
Streets litter, waste, open defecation, air pollution and the likes are what residents of the commercial nerve center of Nigeria are faced with on a daily basis. In Lagos, environmental pollution is the order of the day. Residents deal with a suffocating mix of air pollution, improper solid waste disposal, and other forms of pollution in the city streets, leaving many residents battling with respiratory problems, flooding, and other illnesses.
The plastic waste, the rubber waste are the most dangerous because they do not decay. A lot of this plastic waste, they are not well disposed. They are not disposed of properly and they find their way into the drains. In Lagos State today, anywhere you find yourself, just open up the drains. Just open up the drainage system if it's covered. If it's not covered, it's obvious there. And you see a situation where when rain falls, a particular line of the drainage system, you see that line because it's blocked. Now we have in Lagos State, the collectors were registered. Some of these trucks can't even get to the residence of a lot of the people living in the communities. So people have to converge at a particular point. Now when they dump the waste there, it takes a while before the collectors, the trucks arrive there to pick up the waste. That's another issue, which is another environmental issue. So the collection in itself is poor. And you see some of these trucks collecting this waste. When they even collect the waste, waste dropping on the road.
You look at Lagos, you think that you are in one big dustbin. Some people are in a bit cleaner part of the dustbin. Let's say huge dustbin we're in. This is not a city. Let's. Which part of the city you want to tell me? Tell me. I've gone around. Is it Lekki? Is it Ikoyi? Or you want to tell me it's Ajegunle or Yanokwaja?
The way we live is also a problem. We have three. We have the tertiary canals. We have the secondary canals. We have the primary canals. The tertiary canals is the one you see in front of your houses. Those ones are people called gutter. In front of our houses. If that one in front of our houses is clean, the secondary canal will be clean. The primary canal, the big one, will be clean. And therefore you see a steady flow into the lagoon. But tertiary canals in front of our houses where people dump in the dead of the night. When it is raining, they will go. When in the dead of the night, they will just go. Even people who should know better. People with full dose of Western education, you see them dropping those things instead of the canal. That has been our problem. Because if the tertiary drains are okay, you won't see anything in the secondary drains. You won't see anything in the primary canals. You won't see anything in the lagoon.
While the megacity still practices the creation and maintenance of dump sites, which is situated close to the abode of residents, and with the monies doled out for the management of waste in the state, locals still suffer as a result of improper disposal of waste. These and many more prompted this investigation by TV360 Nigeria on why residents are made to deal with loss of lives and properties, and to get answers on if the state government is up to the task of making provisions for proper waste disposal and drainage maintenance.
Attitude is a problem, and Lagos spends a lot of money in cleaning the canals, dredging, constructing, that's giving it concrete alignments so that it will be easy for you to clean. There are so many of them, so we are taking it one after the other. But the problem is the attitude of Lagosians. If you are driving on the corridor, you see them dropping it. Thank God we have sweepers. We have thousands of sweepers in Lagos. By 5 o'clock, they're already on the street taking those things. It could have been worse. So we are thinking, because we are thinking out of the box. What do? We are coming to the age of dikes. That's what is called dikes. That is using concrete wall to prevent, water from coming into the city. In pumps. And another one is to provide a kind of tunnel, a well, very deep well, where you allow this, this flood to go in. Thereafter, you now use pump to throw it into the lagoon.
With the increasing spate of indiscriminate dumping of waste in Lagos State, the mortality rate from pollution is set to witness a spike. The State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu said his administration has spent over 2 billion naira on the rehabilitation of dump sites across the state, while another 1 billion naira is being invested to provide the necessary infrastructure for waste management. If these projects have been carried out, residents are yet to witness the results or see an improvement in waste management.
We're seeing recurrent cases of Lassa. Of course, the rats go there, eat, pick jams, transfer to people, and then the same thing now we're having monkeypox. So in reality, if we deal with the challenges of waste alone, I am sure that our health system will be good. Our health itself will be good. Now, when you now get to the waterways, plastic floating, dead animals floating, dead human being floating, microplastic dropping in there, we're eating the fish. It's a scandal. It's honestly a scandal. I think the more we put attention to the challenges of the environment and how waste is handled in this part of the world, the better for us. A mega city, 25 million people, still counting, and we cannot get waste right, waste disposal right. We're not ready.
The poor waste system and then the flooding, they go hand in hand. So I just want to ask, would you say this is a challenge for the government? Because then again, we have the rules, don't dump your waste, and every other thing that the state government puts in place, but then people do not obey this. So is this a challenge for the government? Would you say the government cannot handle its residents?
No. Just like every other society, you are trained for a long time. When you do something, when you are trained to do something, right from day one, you will comply. You will comply. We are not throwing our hands up into surrender. We are doing our work. We are not complaining. But we are doing advocacy. We are talking. We are having meetings. We go for retreats. We talk to Lagosians through radio and television. We will continue to do that until we get lives in such a way that you cannot, when you finish your bottled water, through the window. We'll get to a time when people will not do it again. We'll get to a time when you don't see, plastics on our roads, cellophane paper, this takeaway place, you will not see it.
Environmental pollution is not the only challenge residents face as a result of improper waste disposal. The rising issue of climate change, human activities has upset the balance of nature. Rising sea levels, extreme weather conditions and intense droughts can wreak havoc on people's livelihoods and communities. A visit to an environmentalist helps paint a clearer picture of the disaster that awaits Lagos State if nothing is done about the nonchalance of residents and the government.
In Lagos, we have a situation where dump sites are located or sited, but there is no restriction that halts urbanization to that located dump site. So, for example, there's a place called Yanoba. The place was located about 25 years ago, and it was far from city. But there was no restriction in terms of urbanization, urban development. Today, there are houses surrounding that dump site. So, health-wise, the people living around that place are not safe. Those dump sites at Ojota, when it was located, houses were far from that place. It's a place that in those days, because the methane, when the heat from methane starts coming out, you see smoke coming out. You think they are burning the waste. They are not. It's the methane that is reacting. All right. So you see this is from distance. But today, houses have been built around that place, such that people who are living there, they are not safe. The water system is poisoned. Then the methane that comes out of that emits from that place, it's not safe for the humans living around there.
Lagos State generates 13,000 tons of waste daily, but not all of the waste ends up at designated dump sites. Some end up in canals, drains, and on the road.
In terms of management of the dump sites, usually in most countries, these things are kind of like privatized, who are genuinely involved in environmental activities, to experts who understands this thing, right? The government cannot do it alone. The government is expected to generate, to bring up, put up legislations. You know, they are supposed to be a kind of, they try to stabilize within the private sector and the public sector, right? But they are not expected to manage the dump sites. Professionals who understands the dangers and the kind of harmful chemicals that comes that are supposed to manage the dump site. But here, an agency was created, Loma, to manage that dump site, okay? And those dump sites are not well managed. We gathered every year to discuss the environment issues in Lagos State. You know, we call it the Climate Change Summit, where a session is dedicated to waste management. It was during that particular period we introduced this idea of having separating waste. But ever since then, the advocacy on separation of waste has been poor. It has been put aside. So waste management is poor. There was a time they made it mandatory for every house, every building to have a waste bins, the big bins. Then Loma produced all those things. Today, what do we have? Do we have them at all? People have to find a way to just get their waste sorted out somewhere. During the same time of Ashola, every last Saturday of the month was the Environmental Sanitation Day, where everybody in the community will meet and they will discuss they can do. Okay, these are the issues, these are the community issues, how they dump their waste, if they are going to dig the floor, and you know, a lot of things they do. But since they cancelled the monthly sanitation, what has been happening? People pay less concern in terms of what happens within the environment, especially on waste disposal.
This sight and the smell being emitted and inhaled is a regular sight and way of life for Lagosians. Dumping waste at designated dump located around residential areas are a breeding ground for different sorts of contagious illnesses. Despite the fetid smell, trading activities take place around these dump sites, while motorists, passers-by, and residents close to the dump sites battle with the stench daily.
I'm not okay with it because I have breathing issue. Though I thank God that God is taking control. But this thing has affected me again after I got cured. So government should do something about it.
It has affected everybody around this place. Both residents, bypassers, everybody. Every living human being is being affected by this thick smoke here.
According to the World Health Organization, globally, almost 1 in 10 people are estimated to fall ill every year from eating contaminated food, while 420,000 die from foodborne diseases, which can be deadly, especially in children under 5 years of age, and out of the 420 deaths, 1/3 are children. The World Health Body also says making the environment healthier can prevent about 13 million deaths yearly and avoid 13% to 37% of the world's disease burden.
When these places have been contaminated with pollutants, with debris, it blocks. And so because it blocks the flow of water, and this was originally a canal that would have served, as a route for water to move, the water comes up and fill people's homes.
Sometimes when you see children with diarrhea, you battle and they die. You cry, you feel depressed. I remember in one of the situations, one of the instances, the baby was probably playing, a day before, got bad. The mother, they were trying to do what they like. But by the time they brought the baby, lady was bad. In the emergency room, the baby died.
The revelation by the medical practitioners raised some form of concern as I proceeded to the Lagos State Primary Healthcare Board for an interview with the Permanent Secretary of the Board, Ibrahim Akinwumi Mustafa, after an official request through a letter submitted at the office of the Permanent Secretary and series of calls and message exchanges with the Public Relations Officer of the Board, Olumide Filani. My continuous request for an interview with the Permanent Secretary was turned down with jet lag as an excuse. The request for statistics of Lagos State residents who have been treated for cholera and other diseases contracted through food or water since the start of 2022 was also turned down, as I was informed that such data cannot be easily provided to me for reasons best known to me.
From weeks back, where I was told I could get the statistics or the data, it seems like a failed day.
However, according to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, in its July 4th to 31st, 2022 report, citing routine case-based data and outbreak line lists retrieved by the National Cholera Technical Working Group, Lagos had 47 suspected cases of cholera, with one death. The Center for Disease Prevention and Control states that as of July 31st, 2022, a total of 3,610 cholera cases, including 91 deaths, were reported from 31 states in Nigeria, and that as of September 16th, 2022, 1,087 suspected cholera cases, including 13 deaths, were reported in Nigeria. A sit-down expert on the way forward is next on the agenda as Dr. Akanem narrates the poor living condition of Lagosians and its side effects.
I have managed a number of patients who had cholera. Some had hepatitis A, some had amoebic dysentery, and others had diarrhea. And of course, there are clear symptoms of this condition, like vomiting, stooling, of course, like abdominal pain, and many other symptoms that are characteristics of cholera or amoebic dysentery or hepatitis A. I've practically seen cases where people also have their food stuff, their fruits and other things they sell, edible commodities, fall into gutters, and they still pick it up and sell it to Lagosians. These are some of the things that are causing the myriads of diseases that we see in Lagos year in, year out. Have you wondered why Lagos is the epicenter of disease infection across the length and breadth of Nigeria? It's because of the poor drainage and the poor disposal of waste. Unfortunately, these are the things that we are experiencing in Lagos. And for this to stop, we must improve our sewage disposal, we must improve the disposal of waste materials, and we must limit air pollution as much as possible.
Taking a walk around the surrounding of the health expert's residence, and you can tell the reason behind his passionate call for a cleaner Lagos.
I stay in Lagos, and I can tell you that in my location where I stay in Lagos, properly disposed, the gutters are very dirty, and there's no conscious effort to ensuring that Lagos is clean. We pay our dues as at when due, but unfortunately, the waste management agencies are not doing their work.
In July 2022, an unprecedented two-day rainfall claimed the lives of 3 children of the same parents and 4 adults at the Mercy of Christ Apostolic Church in Lagos State, as one of the many incidents that have transpired in the state, with many living in fear during the rainy season.
On the 8th day of that continuous rainfall, which was on a Sunday, the entire Lagos was flooded. And I have a personal friend who works with a bank who was called to come restore funds in the ATM machine. He went there and he was coming back with the wife, and they got their vehicles got taken over by the heavy flow of water, and they dumped them in the wide drain. And after 3 days, that was when they saw their bodies. And this person I'm talking about happens to be my account manager at the GT Bank as at then. So that's my own experience. There are a lot of experiences in Lagos that we have experienced, even in other cities as well. Drains, even in other cities outside Lagos State, where flooding has been responsible for unnecessary and loss of life and so. And that wasn't the only experience. In that particular year, about a total of 21 people died in Lagos State in different communities.
May we not have the kind of flooding we have in other climes, which will lead to the deaths of hundreds of people. That's one that almost 1,000 people died, I think, either in Pakistan or so. First, government will sympathize with the people. This is a natural thing that we cannot prevent. You sympathize, show empathy.
The National Emergency Management Agency says flood has claimed the lives of over 300 in 2022, with the figure on the rise as bad roads and blocked drainages have led to increased flooding. A World Bank publication, Cost of Pollution in Lagos, estimates that illness and premature deaths due to ambient air pollution caused losses of $2.1 billion in 2018, representing 2.1% of the state's GDP.
For the government, the environmental challenge residents face is no fault of theirs, but mainly that of the residents. Nigeria's commercial hub and former capital was ranked 171 out of 172 countries in the list of the world's second least livable urban area and worst city in Africa, leaving the city with its economic, political and security challenges to also dwell in a heap of waste. Mary Kanu, TV360, Nigeria.
Thanks for joining us on News Now at this time. Thank you for joining us today on the newsroom. The Lagos State Emergency Management Authority has said there's going to be one vote woman and the rampant illegal spectrum frequencies. The banks took over the news on the Nigerian stock market today as sellers eased.
Have accused some enemies